Hi, welcome to the March 14th meeting of the Kubernetes VMware SIG, where we're talking about the Kubernetes cloud provider for VMware, as well as generic topics for users on running Kubernetes successfully on vSphere infrastructure. Today's agenda is going to start with some community updates, and then we'll follow that with some updates on active project status. If you've got any topics you'd like to discuss, feel free to add them to the agenda. I think we'll have a little extra time today based on what I see there so far. Let's just start out. Let me see. Wait, I'm having trouble scrolling the agenda document myself. It looks like a lot of people have it open. Okay, I'm going to start by observing that over in the Slack channel, we're still getting user inquiries about issues with mounts acting flaky when the host VM acting as a Kubernetes worker node is shut down or possibly even deleted. I posted a couple links to issues. The first person who reported this actually, apparently they were using Rancher as their Kubernetes distro, but running it on top of vSphere infrastructure, and posted it as a Rancher issue. And then I think it was reposted at a arguably more proper place inside the Kubernetes repo, but there might be more information available over in that Rancher report. But it seems like we've had this going on for over a quarter. And I think we had come to the conclusion that some of these might be race conditions, configuration issues, but whatever it is, if users keep having this happen recurringly, even if it is configuration issues, in my opinion, we should investigate what we can about preventing this from happening in the first place. And then for cases where it happens regardless, even if it is a user configuration issue, having what comes out in the logs point them to a solution that maybe doesn't have them going out in the Slack channel every time. So I don't actually know what was going on here, but maybe somebody who's working on storage can go take a look at these issues. Anybody else got opinions on this? Or okay, let's. Another thing that was raised over in the Slack channel was that somebody complained that the current documentation for the cloud provider, and this is linked in the notes, did not make it clear what the permissions were on the actual vCenter account. I know the cheat shortcut is to simply make it a universal admin, but if you want to give this account the least available privilege, the least possible privilege, the complaint was that perhaps the documentation doesn't list everything that is required. And there was another comment there indicating that if you're using the old Flash UI, you can't get to all of the permissions. Now, that would be a case where maybe the documentation should specifically say point blank, don't use the Flash UI. I know historically a lot of people use it anyway, but perhaps a better solution would be to even add to the documentation an example script using the CLI. I don't care whether it's Go vMommy or one of the other vSphere CLIs that creates an account with the right permissions. It strikes me that maybe there's less that can go wrong, and it would be, rather than listing these for UI use, practically speaking, anybody writing distributions or anybody using multi-cluster and deploying these Kubernetes, multiple Kubernetes clusters at volume is probably going to favor the CLI rather than using the GUI anyway. Anybody else have any thoughts, opinions on that? Or any volunteers out there who are in the dev community who want to sign up to actually do this. I guess this isn't technically, it would be dev if it's writing the CLI, but it's docs if it's cleaning up the docs.
Yeah, I've noticed that the docs are for the entry provider there, the one that's linked to there in the agenda notes. Those docs are very stale, and it doesn't surprise me that there are some problems and stuff like that with what's actually required, because I've been running into it just trying to get it running in my configuration as well. So I don't know. There definitely needs to be an update. There's no argument there.
I wish Fabio was here. Fabio said that he had unanticipated issues because apparently in Europe, the daylight savings time sync hasn't occurred yet. So he didn't pay attention to the meeting start time, so he's not going to be able to make it today. But that said, I know he's an expert on the Go vMommy. Does anybody know if you can use that as a CLI to create an account?
Yeah, I personally haven't gotten that far to using Go vMommy, like the Go VC, to create user accounts and permissions and stuff.
I know for sure you can do it using the PowerShell version of the CLI, but I know in the Kubernetes world that the Venn diagram of PowerShell use and Kubernetes use probably has very little overlap. Okay, let's move on to the next community update item. The KubeCon Barcelona sessions were posted, and this SIG got a couple sessions accepted. The agenda and notes doc has links to these sessions if you want to figure out the exact day of the week and time. Although in my experience at KubeCon, sometimes those move around a bit. You know, the operators of the conference sometimes have a speaker who gets accepted and tells them they've got travel issues arriving or staying on a particular day. So I've seen these shifts sometimes, but so I didn't put the actual time date here, but the things are there. There are a boatload of additional sessions that are kind of potentially related to running Kubernetes on vSphere, but they're not vSphere specific in their entirety. You know, things, generic topics like using cluster API across all cloud providers. So I didn't try to list everything. I only listed the ones that are affiliated with the SIG. There is also an optional VMware sponsored workshop that's a pre-event. And I don't really know, I haven't heard the details on that pre-event, whether that's going to be a workshop using vSphere infrastructure or not, but that's a potential thing that will be related to this SIG. I've also heard that for people who didn't get their proposals accepted, there's some third-party organization running a 2-day event starting Saturday for hosting rejected sessions, which sounds interesting. Since it starts Saturday, I think I probably won't be there just because I already booked my flight, but there might be some interesting things there. I know at other tech conferences I've been to, when they've had these rejected things, sometimes I've seen cases where those are actually better presentations than the official ones. Anyway, let's move on to...
Actually, Steve, while you were talking there, I did go check on GoVC, and it does have the ability to create roles and assign permissions and stuff to user accounts.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to add that too. I pinged Doug, and he said yes, there is.
Yeah. So what I would like is to get a volunteer who would actually write a script example of, well, the first step is figuring out what permissions are actually needed, which, having been there before on previous products, sometimes I fully appreciate that isn't necessarily automatic. Somebody might have to look at all the calls being made to the API to figure out what permissions are needed. But if we could get a script that creates an account, that might be a great contribution to the documentation. Anyway, let's move on to active project updates. Fabio normally does this, but he couldn't be here today. But starting with the cloud provider, somebody made some nice notes there on cloud provider updates. Whoever did that, why don't you go?
That's me, Steve. So I'll cover cloud provider and CSI.
Okay, thanks.
So yeah, for the cloud provider, some things that have happened since our last meeting. So there is an enhancement to do only report IPs that are actually bound to VNix. So that's actually there now. And I was one who implemented and verified that. So that's good. And then there's a bunch of stuff that's related to like how the project built. So like we're now using a Go 112, and then there were some makefile updates. And the Go 112 update was basically to keep in line with what Kubernetes is now being built with. And then there's a bunch of EDE stuff that was added with Sonobui. And there's a bunch of like housekeeping related stuff, like to do fixed formatting, vet, lints, and related stuff that, so a lot of the stuff that I just mentioned, like the Go makefile stuff, the vet formatting, so that was all and that was all done by Andrew Cutts. So, kudos to him for doing that. And
okay, I got a couple questions. So reporting IPs bound to VNix, how can you have an IP if you're not bound to a VNIC? Is that like an orphaned virtual network adapter inside the VM that goes to nowhere but still has a hard-coded IP? Is that
no. So like as an example, like one of the probably the best examples of that is like Docker has an internal like Ethernet adapter, right? That's actually not,
Okay. So
that was getting reported along with other related stuff that's out there, right?
Okay, so basically synthetic internal
internal networks
are ignored, and only the ones that are associated with the vSphere hypervisor. Got it. Then with regard to the Go 112 support, just out of curiosity, if I go dabble, what happens if you use an even newer Go? Does it generally work, or is that
is the absolute newest Go right now?
Okay. All right. Thanks. Let's move on to the cluster API status. Was that you too, David, or was that somebody else?
Oh, that's me.
Okay.
So we've scrubbed the board down to 8 issues. We pushed a lot of issues into Next because we have a lot fewer people working on it. And this is the only cluster API vSphere. This is CAT-V that we've been referring to internally. And I wrote down there, would welcome help. So we have 8 issues, and we're also working on some CAP-E issues. And my name is on every single issue. So any help would be welcome. There is apparently an issue that was exposed in a PR recently, that our repo seems to be broken somewhere, and our CI did not catch it until now. And I've been doing some code archaeology, trying to figure out which commit broke it.
What does it mean to have a repo broken? It means you can't clone it, or?
It means, well, what I mean by broken means that it's not creating a cluster, a target cluster. And one of the things that it does when it tries to create a target cluster is that it tries to SSH into the machines to pull out the kubeconfig file. And it's not able to SSH into the machine. This showed up yesterday in this PR, and I thought, okay, it might be the PR, it might be CI. So this morning I tried it on my local machine, and it's broken in my local environment also. So it's not just this PR, it's what exists in the repo and a couple of commits back. So right now I'm trying to get the repo back to working condition. And like I said, I got 9 issues I'm working on, and I got 2 weeks. I'm requesting help.
Any volunteers here in this meeting want to step up and help Loke? I'm going to hunt you down later.
But I'll jump in at once, right?
Yeah, I may have some free time, but next week I'm kind of wrapping some stuff up this week. We'll see.
I will spend a couple of hours trying to get you up to speed if you're willing to jump in and give me some help.
Yeah, I still need to wrap up a bunch of stuff. I'm hoping I can finish it this week, but I have to wait.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for the offer.
Okay. If you don't get any, let me know. I'll get more aggressive and try to publicly shame people and into helping you out. But thanks for that update, Loke. Finally, let's move on to the CSI plugin for vSphere. I suspect this was your work, David, on providing these notes.
Yeah. So yeah, I put the notes in there. So we had originally this goes back to like the last release. We had originally implemented, because CSI is technically supposed to work for any container orchestrator like DCOS and Mesos, and apparently there was an update in between this last release and this upcoming release where we broke that, and Travis ended up fixing that, so that's awesome. And then Travis also ended up implementing a bunch of Ginkgo related testing, which starts to cover some of our end-to-end stuff that we're going to be doing for CSI. We also had because it shares the same repo, CSI shares the same repo with the CCM. And that uses the same makefile and stuff like that. So we got the enhancements there in the Go 112. And then there's also some stuff implemented for environment variables taking precedent over config file. So that's basically if you had a config file with X number of stuff defined or whatever, and related to testing or whatever you're trying to do, just to check something out, you can override like a particular value in the config file using an environment variable. And then just the normal format vet linting related stuff that Andrew Cutts had implemented. So yeah, we're on the testing side of things and kind of tidying things up. We're definitely really good on the CCM and the CSI side of things, and we're going to continue that up until the release coming up shortly.
So I was just at the Scale conference in the past few days where Saad Ali, the chair of the storage SIG, gave a presentation on the new 1.1 CSI spec. Are we good with regard to that, whatever changed in the 1.1 spec where the stuff just works, or are we going to have to do another? Are we compliant with that now, or are we going to have to do another turn to get there?
Yeah, we're gonna have to do another turn. We could technically leave it where it's at right now, and because we don't have the snapshot or the expand volume functionality implemented anyways, so it would still work if they update this on the Kubernetes side. But yeah, we probably will think about making the update anyway, so that at least we have the functions stubbed out and minimally return not implemented. But yeah, we're going to take a look at that as well.
Yeah, it might be worth doing it if it's not a whole lot of work, if it's just a rebuild, just because it'll save time and getting questions as to whether you are compliant.
Yeah, there is a little bit of work. We need to generate on the Go CSI side. We need to regenerate, basically the stubs. It's not difficult or anything. We just need to go through the exercise of doing it.
Yeah, and it's work we're going to have to do eventually anyway at some point in time.
Agreed. So, yep.
Okay, that's it for ongoing project status. At this point, I'm going to open up the forum for general questions and discussions. Does anybody else want to talk about anything? Okay, I won't make this go on longer than it has to, so last chance. Any topics at all, at least related to Kubernetes and vSphere infrastructure? Going on. Okay, we're going to call this one early, and you can spend the time on contacting Loke to volunteer to help him out on the cluster API.
Or writing a Go vMommy script.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to check all of you on this call. I've got your name, so I'm put it in the agenda for next meeting on what you did on your report card. It'll go on your permanent record, including you.
Let me delete my name real quick.
Yeah. Okay,
All right.
bye everybody. Thanks for coming.
See you, peeps.